This is Groundeffected. My name is your dad, and let's get straight into the. It finally happened. I made my own sculpt. Obviously, it is a spider version of sculpt, and I have made it for you to see. But don't look. Now, this sculpt wasn't something that I did all on my own. To be totally honest with you, I sculpted the base, and we went through many very different iterations of how I was going to do the base. I sculpted this weird little traffic light, which in the country that I'm from, previously, we called that a robot. But the way that this started was, I sculpted this weird looking little sketch, and I sent this to a guy called Taregh Saber. Now, I know Taregh from a couple of projects in the past because I did some commissions which he had been the sculptor of those commissions. In fact, there is one of them right there in the corner. Anyway, basically, so I came up with a concept, I went looking for an idea, and I put it together based off the artwork of Mike Mikone. And this is an artist who does some pretty incredible artworks, but the real picture is this one that I chose because I felt like this gave a really cool feel about Spidey, the way that I know Spider-Man to be. Now, the program that I used to sculpt this in is called Nomad Sculpt, and basically it's a paid app, but it works pretty well. As you can see, I placed in some holes and stuff so that I can put in electronics, because obviously I would like a little light inside of it. Without any further ado, let's just get to painting the model. I know you saw it in the background, but let's just do it. Pretend that that never happened. I printed this Spider-Man on my Uniformation GK3 Ultra, as well as my GK2, the old smaller version of the 3D printer. That is the Ultra, that's the big one. Anyway, they always, no matter how good your printer is, need some form of preparation, whether that is a sanding, maybe you have a part that you didn't support too well, maybe there is just some support marks left over. You always need to prepare your models, and another part of preparing is to give them a primer layer. And now, of course, this model is way too big to fit into my airbrush booth, so I'm gonna have to make some kind of a makeshift protection situation for the next steps. And that is because I want to paint some white paint over the top of everything. This is going to be a good base for my reds to go over, but it's also going to give me a good idea of where the highlights are going to be and the shadows are going to be on this particular model, because I'm going to take him apart when I paint him, and I want those highlights and shadows to be really dramatic. So the best way to do this is to give it a zenithal. A zenithal is the magic trick to just finding out where your light is, because once you start like that, you will have a map for the rest of your model. Now, working on the base parts, before I get to the spider, I'm going to start painting the walk light that he is sitting on, and this is a weird kind of metallic color, and the only way I could think of painting this was by painting it with a metallic purple over the top of the zenithal that I laid down, putting a caribou crimson shade, and using some of this contrast blue gray griff charger, whatever it's called, to spray into some of the shadows, as well as around that sort of pole area of the walk light. Of course, on the bottom there's a metallic piece. I don't know if this is supposed to be metallic. I sculpted this, but I still don't know what the hell the thing is. I just made it up. It's like a conical shape at the bottom, and it sort of felt like it was meant to be there at the time. Now coming to doing the colors, I don't know what it is. So I painted that with a silver, and then I came back and painted black over the little rim, because I imagined that would not be metal. That is probably some form of a concrete, and the way that it was mounted into the ground, I don't know this because I'm not a builder. Next step was to then dry brush gray over the top of that thing that I thought was now concrete, the rim of it. And then I'm going to use my airbrush to spray back some more shadows, because I was not obviously happy enough with the shadows, but essentially when I was then finally happy with the shadows, I came to add some weathering onto this thing, and the easiest way to do this is by taking a panel line wash and letting that fall into all the crevasses and cracks all over it. And I feel like this is just a cheat code. You might see this in almost every single video of mine, and that is because this is literally just a cheat code for adding some depth. Genuinely, it could also be the worst thing you could ever do, but don't do that. Just it's cheat code. Excellent. Moving on swiftly to some more weathering. Around this thing, I would imagine that people touch it. It's been bing, bang, bong, boshed. It's been smacked around, and it's old, and it probably has some form of chipping. And to emulate that chipping, I took some silver paint and used a very disheveled paintbrush to tap that onto the edges and all the places where the paint probably would wear off of this thing. Now on the back there is a little bit of graffiti, so I figured I would just draw that in by using, at first, deck tan, because I thought this was going to be the best way. And only halfway through doing this did I actually realize that I had a white Posca pen, and I should have just used that in the beginning. So I'm going to move on very swiftly to painting the rest of this actual base, and that's going to consist of just using grey to dry brush over the area of the pavement side, which is going to be like pavement color, which I think is grey. I'm not 100% sure about that, but I think grey will do in this particular case. Also, I'm going to take some Caribou Crimson and spray that back over the road. Notice that I didn't actually clean up any of the grey. That was a little bit oversprayed from my haphazard dry brushing techniques. I'm going to take some silver and dry brush that over the grate on the base, and I hope that you would notice later on what is coming out of that grate, but you will find out a little bit later on. Now taking a bit of blue wash, mixing that into the grey that I have, this is going to tint it to a slightly bluish grey, I guess. If you mix blue and grey, that's what it makes. Yes, I then sprayed that at a very acute angle to just catch the tops of the sides of the base, and I was not quite happy with that, so I used that Griff Charger grey to just kind of tint that color a little bit more. Now I'm going to take some deck tan and paint the zebra crossing that is obviously in front of the walk light, and on the walk light, which you didn't notice that I did, is I painted the reds and I printed it in clear. You didn't notice that because I didn't show you, because I completely forgot to record this part, but don't mind that. After I had painted the black over the top of everything, I dry brushed the edges and put it inside. So as I'm sure you can tell, this particular video was not sponsored by anyone but myself. So I have got this file available, and if you would like to get this file, then you should check out the link in the description. It is not the exact same as that one, but the file is available. It's slightly different, and there is a reason for this, and I'm going to tell you that reason right now. Since I have the control, since it's my sculpt, also and Taregh's, basically that means that I have the power to make this one a one of one. There is no other like this one in the world. That is because this one is the only one that exists and I made it. You should click on the link in the description so that you can get your own version of the Spidey right now. Home to the mountain. In order to paint the Spidey, I ran out of red ink, which is not a good thing, but it's not the absolute end of the world, so I'm going to use this contrast red, which is Ball Red, which is actually a really nice red, but it's not quite as pungent as the red ink that I wanted. However, this actually worked in my favor, because I wanted to make sure that the red that I had was going to give a good vibe. I watered down this particular red, and that is because I wanted it to be a little bit more see-through, to show a bit more of the black underneath it. The black is going to be really dark. It's going to be like a maroony dark red color, but I want to make that a little bit more redder, so I'm going to take some Caribou Crimson and spray that into the shadows from upside his backside, basically. This is going to then highlight those shadows with a bit more deeper reds. For his pants and the blue portions of his suit, which in this case is actually going to be black, I'm going to be using a Black Templar, which is also a contrast paint, but it has a real like bluey greenish kind of color to it. Now I 3D printed this weird little shaped thing to go on the inside of the walk light, and that's to hold some 3mm LEDs. This is something that if you did buy the model, you would have to figure out yourself, because unfortunately I'm too afraid to allow people to do things like this off of my back, because I don't want to be blamed for the fingers that are cut and burned during the soldering and processing of doing this thing. Anyway, I soldered all that stuff together with positives all to positives and negatives all to negatives. This means that I probably don't know what I'm doing with electronics, but don't worry about it, because look, light comes out. Annoyingly, I should have made 2 of these panels, but let's just move on and forget about the shame and start painting the rest of the blue or black parts parts of the suit. Now what you may notice is that I did mask this guy off. The easiest way to do this is with a brand new fresh knife blade in your craft knife and using a large piece of tape to tape over the thing, press down the edges, and gently cut around it like you're just drawing the edge. Obviously, if you push too hard, you're going to cut right into your model, and you don't want to do that. Now, what I didn't record again was that I added a yellow highlight from the zenithal area, but after that I came back and I did actually record this part, was where I put a blue into the shadowed areas. You can see the yellow on this piece particularly, and you can see where the blue is just on the shadowed areas. So this means that there is like a kind of two-tone thing going on these pants. This is just to help with the mood, and hopefully it'll all come together in the end. Now, of course, I felt like I wanted to redefine some of the muscle features, so I went back with a null oil, which is one of the weirdest colors in the world because I'm pretty sure it's green and not actually a black. Anyway, I sprayed that into all the crevasses around his muscles and creases on the shapes of the muscles of his body, particularly around his butt and the thigh areas, because he has a lot of muscles on his legs as he is a Spider-Man and he needs that muscular legs to do Spider-Man-y things. Now, of course, after that is dried, I can then unmask or take off the mask from the model. This is always a satisfying part of painting a model, and also the part where you find out if there are tears or not. Someone mentioned in the comments somewhere to put a clear coat down, a gloss clear coat, before I did the masking, and I did that this time and I had absolutely no problems. But maybe I wouldn't have had problems before, who knows. Anyway, to do lines on any kind of a Spider-Man, just buy one of these pens. You can do it with a brush. It depends on how you feel about your life. If you want to have some time and just not really be too hateful about life, just buy a brush pen and freaking draw them on with the pen, and don't worry about what anyone says. There are some white lines on the base. By the way, this thing was painted, the renders were painted for me by a guy called Hicontrast, who is a tattoo artist, acquaintance of the channel, and annoyingly, he painted white lines. Now, of course, I would have suggested white lines, but however, I would have, knowing that I needed to paint them, not suggested white lines, and white's the worst lines to do anyway. So the easiest way for me to do this was by using an oil paint. Annoyingly, if I had more time, I would have come back and done maybe 2 or 3 coats of this, but basically what you want to do is mix up an oil with some artist thinners, and then you kind of just put that everywhere. I did spray a clear coat of gloss before I did this, so it makes it easier for me to wipe up. As you can see, I can just wipe up everything, leaving that white in the creases of the lines. If I had more time, I might go back and do that one more time just to make it a little bit stronger. I then took deck tan and I painted that over the Spider-Man word that is on the front of this base. Now, if you are buying particularly the file, the STL files, then you will probably not have that writing on your base, so you will probably skip this part, and I'm also not quite sure why I added it in the video. So parts that you will need to do is actually the emblem on his chest, and for that I just used that Black Templar contrast paint. Be careful with this paint because it's a little bit watery, so if it does touch a side of a crevasse, it might want to weep all the way in, which can make your nice crispy lines not so crispy anymore. I used that exact same paint to also paint the rim around the lenses of his mask, because it's black, I think. So I painted that, and when I was done painting that, I used a little bit of gloss clear over his emblem. Now, the reality is that I actually used the Tamiya X22 clear, but to set that up, I like to put down a normal acrylic clear first, because I find that that X22 Tamiya clear likes to eat up paint if you faff around with it too much. I then took deck tan and painted about 2 or 3 layers over the lenses of his eyes to get that white nice and fresh on the inside. I then needed to paint the shadows, and those shadows are going to be made up of this Griff Charger Grey, which is a contrast paint, and I did water this down a little bit and added a couple of layers to this to build it up, and I sprayed that from the same angle where the shadows were, because they wouldn't be just directly underneath his eyes, they would probably be slightly off to the side. I'm not sure. I think that's how they would be. I also took black and went back around the rim again one more time just to make sure that this was extra crispy, because this is an area that people are going to be looking at. I was then able to stick his arm on and put him aside. Now to work on that little piece that's sticking out the bottom of the sewer. This is the thing that I happily put in because I wanted to add a bunch of little things to kind of Easter egg the base and just the rest of the picture, essentially. So I added a little venom coming out of that drain, and I painted his eyes on by using a Posca pen. I can now put my spider onto his perch, and I can start working on the rest of the things that are on the base of this model. For example, this is Mary Jane's camera. Now, of course, it would be weird that Peter Parker has Mary Jane's camera, but I felt like it made sense that perhaps Peter had to borrow the camera during a very quick escape because he needed to go do something. Maybe something to do with Venom, who is on the floor, coming out of the thing, crawling away from the situation. Anyway, I'm not here to tell you the story of Spider-Man. I'm telling you about how I painted this. And so I used a dry brush of silver to paint over the entire thing. And when I was done with that, I took the panel line cheat code paint and I painted that over everywhere. I also used a bit of black, as you can see, around the middle section of the camera. And then I started working on the lens. And I added a little bit of pink to be reflecting from the pinkish kind of walk light color that I used, and I added a bit of blue to be reflecting from the shadows. I then took some deck tan and painted the webbing that holds this camera against the walk light. I'm not actually sure if I show this, but I did, when I was finished painting this, put a little bit of skeleton horde around the creases of the webbing, as well as I sprayed the edges of them with a little bit of white ink, just to kind of have a bit of variation. On the base, again, another little egg of the Easter kind is a newspaper, for who I think essentially is Spider-Man's biggest friggin' enemy, and that is J. Jonah Jameson and his bloody Daily Bugle. Essentially, this is the bad and good for Spidey, because obviously this is how he paid his rent, but annoyingly, it is something that really does not like him, and so thus, in my mind, is an annoyance and an enemy for Peter Parker. I painted this with just a dry brush and used the cheat code, and then I just pretty much painted the red in place, and once that was done, I called the model done. So it's pretty obvious we are at the end of another Groundeffected video, and I just want to say I truly hope that this video inspires you in any way, whether it inspires you to download some form of sculpting app on your iPad, maybe it inspires you to just try painting something new, or maybe it inspired you to join my Patreon so that you could get this file in the top tier of my Patreon. But more importantly, I just actually hope that there was something in this video that you could take from it and use in your own hobbying escapades. Now, of course, I want to say a super special thank you to the Patreons, because this video was not sponsored, and it is because of the Patreons that I was able to afford to even make a video without it being sponsored in the first place. So thank you to the Patreons. Of course, if you want to join the Patreon, there is access to behind the scenes pictures, there is work in progress stuff. I give you all the videos before they come, you'll know it before everyone else, and if possible, I sometimes upload them a little bit sooner for the Patreon specifically. There are extra videos, extra content, as well as stuff that will never get shown on social medias. So if you want to follow me a little bit more and support the channel, check out my Patreon. This truly helps me as a content creator to just keep the lights on and carry on making videos every single week. Of course, thank you to everybody who watches the videos. If you are sitting on the toilet right now, make sure you wash your hands when you get up, and tell your gran about this channel, because she probably would like it too. As well as, there's a very important thing I have to tell everybody. If you didn't like anything you saw in this video, I don't care. Time to fuck off.